Previously, I wrote a code for collecting the scores from a user for some type of game that has different numbers of rounds with a limited number of rounds. Most of the time when we're playing a game, we don't know how many rounds we're going to go for. We actually know when the final value is or when the winning total is. So I'm going to be doing this based on score instead of based on rounds. So I'm going to be asking my user, what is the winning score instead? And once I know that winning score, I want to use that to keep track of what's going to happen. So I'm going to say, as long as my user's current score is less than their winning score, we want to keep going through another round. Now, I no longer have this variable round because I've removed the for loop and I've removed that round control variable being created. If I want to keep track of how many rounds, I need to create another running total. So we're going to start at round 0, and then the first round is going to be round 1. I could put round 1 here. If I do that, then I need to make sure to put the rounds after I display the round to my user, because the first round I want them to see is round 1. The reason I put this at 0 and then I put round +1 before the rounds is because I might want to know at the end how many rounds they played. If I were to put this at 1 and then move this down here, by the time we're on our last round, so let's say the game ends at round 5, it's going to add 1 more and it would say round 6. So if I were to tell the user how many rounds, it would actually be 1 higher than what the actual rounds were. So back to how I had it. And again, this is gone because that's our for loop. So let's go ahead and check this out and see what it looks like now. So let's say we're playing some type of game. The total is 26 is what we need to get to. In round 1, I got a score of 8, and then 6, 4, 10, and then at the end, my score is 28. Now, there's a lot of other things I might want to implement into this. So a lot of times you might want to tell your user what their current score is. So along the way, I might want to say like their current score. So after I add it up, so after I add the score for that round, then I can tell them this is your current score. I might not want to say that after the first round because they've just told me their first round score. So I could do if round. Now remember, on the first round, round is going to be equal to 1 because I put that before. So if round is not equal to 1, then I want to tell them this is their current score. So they know after every single round what their current score is. So remember, run frequently. So let's say we need 16 to win. So the first round, I didn't see an update. After the second round, I get an update of what my score is. And then the game is over, I've won. And you can always add some type of message here, like congratulations on winning. Or anything like that. Again, another thing that we might see here is a lot of times we're going to actually have 2 players in a game or more, 2 teams or more. And right now this is only keeping track of 1. So I can always keep building and going further beyond what I actually have to begin with. So let's say I have my score and then I have this score becomes, let's say, player 1 or team 1. So I'm going to go ahead and change all those and make this player 1. Or it could be team, or if I wanted to, I could get even fancier and ask what's their names for the person or the team and add those in, but we'll just start here for now. Alrighty, so I have my player 1. I also need my team 2 or player 2. So everything that I have around here, I need to update for the second player. So before I put my condition here, part of my condition is going to be either team 1 winning or team 2 winning. So then I know I need an or. So if team 1 is scoring above the winning score or team 2 is above the winning score, then we stop and somebody won. And here I will want to say who won. I can do this a few different ways, so we'll go there next. So again, finishing up score 2. So we need to tell them, player 1, what was your score in this round? And again, I'm just using that same code and copying and pasting to make it a little bit easier on myself. You could call this score round 1 to be consistent with our player 1 and this one too. It wouldn't really be necessary to change those. I could have them as the same variable. It's all dependent upon what you want to do in the order you put it in. Because I had these score round added to score 1 before asking for the next one, I didn't have to do that as 2 different variables, but I'm going to in this case, just to make sure it's easier for you to understand what's going on with those 2 different scores. Alrighty, so then I have player 1 score update, and then I also want to update what's player 2 and make sure again that everything aligns. So it's always important to go through and make sure that it makes sense. So I have all of this related to player 2 score 2, player 1 score 1, and that's all working out here. And again, this would either be score 1 or score 2 depending on who won, or I could say both scores at the end, so where they finished. The problem with doing this, so if I have both scores like this, I'm going to have this repetition still there, and I don't really need that. So I might as well get rid of this and then just say, congratulations on your win. One easy way to do this is I could say player 1, congratulations on your win, and player 2, congratulations on your win. Obviously, both of them aren't winning. It's based on what scenario, what condition, what happened. So I have an if statement. So if the score 1 is opposite, greater than or equal to score win, they won. Else, the other player won. So we do have potential problems here. Let's say player 1 and player 2 both got a winning score before the end of this while loop. So in that last round, round 5 or round 6, whatever round it got to, both players got a high enough score to be considered winners. This would always favor score 1. So if I have it set up this way, it's going to say, okay, player 1, you won, even if both teams scored above. So let's go through. I'm going to show a scenario of that. So let's say we need 5 points to win. In round 1, 2, and then they got 4. In the second round, let's say that player 1 got 3 points, which would give them enough to win at 5. And let's say player 2 got 4 points, which would put them up to 8. So really they have a higher score, and they would have also been considered a winner based on that 5 points to win. But it says player 1 won the game. Most of the time, it might be a tiebreaker or something like that that happens, but most of the time it's going to be whoever has a higher score. So we can say if player 1 score is higher than player 2 score, it's this. Otherwise, player 2 wins. So in that case, if I don't address the tiebreaker, if there's a tie, now player 2 is favored. They're always going to win. So I could say else if score 2 1, so the opposite, looking at did player 2 win, and then I could have a tie this way. So there's a lot of ways to address this. Sometimes you might have a game where if they're tied, you just keep playing until somebody gets over the other person by 1 point, 2 points, whatever it may be. That's something you would have to address as a condition on your while loop. So this is like the typical process anytime you're going about creating code for something like a game or interacting with the user. You have a small task at hand that you try to focus on, and then you keep adding to that. So as we went through this process, we started with just one person keeping track of their score. First, it was for a limited number of rounds with the for loop, and then we changed it and we said, okay, let's make this based on a final score that we're trying to get. And then we said, okay, what if there's more than one player? There's two players. And then we kept going. You could go even further and say it's a different number of players every time and ask how many players. And then we could change the number of players based on that. And you would have to change how you're collecting your inputs at that point too. There's a lot of other options of how we could collect these inputs if that's our goal. So if I want my number of players to change, I am going to have to ask my user how many players. And then this could be teams or players depending on the context. I could put teams/players. I'm just going to leave this at players for now. All right, so we're going to get a little bit more complicated. This is going to change, and this is going to change. So instead of having a separate variable for every different score that I'm keeping track of, because that's going to be problematic when it comes to how many players I have, I'm going to go ahead and create one variable for all my scores. And I'm going to start it out at zeros. So zeros is a function that will create a vector or a matrix or an array for any number of rows and columns. So for this case, I want to create a row vector. So I'm going to say I want one row, and then I'm going to say I want however many players my user inputs, I want that many columns. That way I can keep track of every different score in a different column of my array. So again, as we talked about, we're going to use that break to break up our different pieces of code and go ahead and just run this so we can see this section. So if I have 7 players, then you see I have an array at 1 by 7. So I have 7 different columns, all with 0. So that's my starting score for all 7 players. So here, instead of being based on these different variables, I'm going to have to be based on scores. And it gets a little bit tricky here, but I could say scores, as long as my scores is less than my scores win. So if I were to run this as a condition, that's what this would look like. So I would create a logical array. I put another condition on here that would then break down this idea of using an array as a condition. You can't add multiple conditions and have any of them be an array. So since I only have one condition, it will work as my one condition with this array of data. Alrighty. So again, here, I don't want to ask every time. I do want to say the round, but I don't want to ask each time hard-coded player 1, player 2, all of that. I'm going to have my players changing. So now I'm going to use that for loop again. For player, let's just call them player so I don't repeat or get too close. 1 through player nums. So through my first player, through however many players they said, I would like to say player, whatever player number they are. So now that's going to be my first placeholder. And then I want to say what round, and I want to say what's your score. So now every time I need to actually collect that value from my user. So then I'm going to say round score. And whatever input my user gives me. There's a lot of different ways you could do this, but I'm going to approach it this way to begin with. And then I want to say my scores for that player is equal to what it was previously, plus my new round score. And I'm I'm going to indent everything to make sure everything's aligning right now. Again, another place that's not going to work anymore. I can't just fprintf with each different player hard-coded. I have to use some type of loop, some type of repetition. So here I'm going to use another for loop, and I'm only going to have one fprintf. So I will do the same thing, going through all my players. And for each player, I'm going to say their score, which would be out of score, first row player. First row player. Now, if I don't put that first row, since it's a vector, it's just going to default and go through the vector. But if it's helpful, sometimes it helps to put the row and the column so it doesn't get confusing. So now we've made a lot of changes here. And this is all going to change again as well. I'm not going to deal with the ties quite yet. I just want to deal with who won. And if there is a tie, it's going to automatically pick someone. And you'll see why in a second. So I want to say, let's find who has the highest score. So I'm going to use the max function. Now, if I just do the maximum of the scores vector, all it's going to tell me is what's the highest value. The nice thing about the max function is you can actually get two different outputs. So I can get the position and the highest score. So here would be which column has the highest score, and then this is what the highest score was. Now, again, that's not going to address if there's two people with the highest score. It's just going to grab one of them, but that's at least, again, this is a start to get a little bit closer. So I don't need an if statement. I would just say, congratulations on your win. And I can say that person. So player %D, which grabs my number, and I want to print that position number. So then that would say player 1, player 2, whoever it was that has the highest score. So how many points do we need to win? Let's say 10, and let's go ahead and, oops. And that's why we error check, because I accidentally hit enter and I didn't need to. So how many points to win? 10 and 4 players. And then I'm just going to give them all different scores. So we see I'm going through player 1, 2, 3, 4. That's working correctly. Those are all for round 1 and round 2. I don't want to make anyone win quite yet. It tells me an update. These are the current scores. So player 2 is almost winning. Notice that I forgot to change the text on this. So it all says player 1. So we'll have to go in and fix our code for that. Another good reason we run our code frequently. All right, so let's make player 2 win. So now it tells us the scores again, and it says, player 10, congratulations on your win. When it should have been player 2. So error checking, we can figure out, okay, why did it say that? So if I look at scores, 6, 10, 9, 6. And what happened here is I mixed up position and highest score. So if I look at this example, the position is supposed to be 2, highest score is 10. Good rule of thumb, a good thing to remember all the time is that your variable names do not control what's happening with these functions. So now I actually am going to be getting position is going to be the second player because I have it in the order that I wanted to have it in. I just had it backwards. So highest score 10, position 2. And player 1, so right here is where I didn't have that player change. So that I should put as a placeholder, and then I should have it be whichever player I'm printing the score for. So player 1, it would print the first score, player 2, the second score, player 3, the third score, and so on. So again, now this works for any score, any number of players, and it's just going through different steps of modifying adding different things, and just doing them one at a time. If we try to start with this code from the very beginning, and I know that this is my goal for my program, it can be a little overwhelming. But if we just start with smaller pieces and incrementally keep building it onto that, it makes it a lot more manageable.